Good morning. It is 9 a.m. and I'll call to order the Board of Directors special meeting workshop for Tuesday, January 14th, 2025. May I have a roll call, please?
Director Meyerhoffen.
Present.
Director Duff.
Present.
Director Martin.
Present.
Vice President Griffith. President Sewell.
Here.
Thank you. We have quorum.
All right. And I'll just make note that Director Griffith is ill and is excused. Item 3, we don't have anyone participating remotely, so we'll skip that. This is a really hot mic. Moving on to item 4, public input. This is the opportunity for members of the public to address the board on matters within the board's jurisdiction. Please limit comments to 3 minutes or less. State law prohibits the board from discussing or taking action on any item not listed on the agenda. Do we have any members of the public wishing to speak today?
President Sewell, we do not.
All right. Moving on for items for discussion. Item 5, mid-year budget review and discussion, fiscal year 2024-2025. General Manager.
Yes, thank you, President Sewell. Just bear with us while we pull up our quick presentation. So unfortunately, Arturo could not be with us today. So Arthur Cabrera is here and myself will be giving this presentation about the mid-year budget review. As you know, we start talking with the staff back in November about what some of the needs are after the first 6 months, and then putting together what our future needs are for the next 6 months. So mid-year summary, there are no changes in revenue projections. I'll get into a little bit more detail of that. Total expenditures increase is almost $4 million. Most of that is capital improvements, which is over $9 million, and we'll go over each of these projects. And then the operating expenses, we are going to be asking for 1 full-time employee. We were hoping to ask for a couple of more, some succession planning that we want to do in operations, but we weren't able to get the job descriptions completed or the salary evaluation, so we'll be bringing that to you at a later time. And also some wastewater cost increases, permit increase, temporary staff, maintenance items, and then, of course, consulting services. So revenue, no increases. If you, on this chart, you'll see the water usage in 2024-25, the last 6 months versus the previous 2 years. We did not assume we saw conservation taking a hold. However, we had a really hot summer. So when you look at the percentage variance for previous year, you see almost 19%, 11%, and so forth. So it's actually trending 10% higher than we anticipated. But again, trying to be cautious, we don't know what the spring is going to be. We could have a very wet spring, so we did not change anything from a revenue increase from a water perspective. How we know that that is due to the hot summer and the water use, if you look at the increases at the Horton plant, very small, very negligible. So most of the use appears to be outdoor, not interior use. We do have a lot of the capital projects we have is based on Army Corps, FEMA, or Bureau of Reclamation grants that we're receiving. However, their award is pending, so we can't actually put them in the budget as something, but we wanted to make sure that when we do get them, a couple of them are design projects, we want to be able to move forward with those. So in the specifics, operating expenses, $336,000, $359,000. Again, this is a workshop, so if there's any questions, please stop me at any time. The full-time assistant, we've been just buried with a lot of paperwork, dealing with conservation as a way of life, doing all of our water loss audits, especially in operations, and also human resources. The regulatory environment continues to increase, and we just need more help making sure that we're following all the proper procedures. The $52,000 is a fully loaded cost, salary and benefits for the remaining 4 months if we were to advertise for it sometime in February. Wastewater cost increases specifically, a permit cost, there was a higher State Water Quality Control Board cost. Temporary staffing, as you know, we've gone through a couple of different changes in wastewater, operator and CPO. We're going to have to add temporary staff to assume those roles. Most of that cost will be offset by salaries not being used. Maintenance costs, $500 excuse me, $50,000 for maintenance and also $10,000 extra for pumps, belt presses, and things like that, just normal maintenance. Danny, do you want to speak to those at all, or? If there's questions on that. Okay, fair enough. And then consulting services, this is MDN Water Management Services related to the budget and payroll preparation. This is an item that we brought to the board. Mike Nesser is the one that owns that company, and he'll be actually giving a presentation as part of the Nancy Wright facility later today. Capital improvements, this is the big item, $9 million. We were trying to keep it as clean as we possibly could. The Nancy Wright facility, we're going to be asking for a budget augmentation of $2 million to handle the change orders. We'll discuss it on the next item. D3 construction, we're also going to be talking about that at this workshop. This is a septic to sewer conversion project. We do have some grants and assessment funding in that particular project. 2.1 million is what we're expecting, but we'll get into more detail on the third item. And then, of course, they are rear yard easements, and our policy has been by board direction to try to get some of those rear yard easements back into the road. So we also have a $2 million water project associated with that. That will come out of the CIP fund. Well rehabilitations, 2830. Those are new projects. In reality, when we're looking at Chrome 6, we feel it's going to be cheaper to rehabilitate those wells than it is to build new wells or treatment facilities. Those two wells are low in Chrome 6. We're working with the state board. Right now, we have it as a CIP fund, but there may be an opportunity to work with the developer and use that available capacity to help the Skyborn project at some point. But we have not started those negotiations yet. Well 34, that is completely developer driven, and that's just an increase in budget. Monitoring well enhancements, replacement of monitoring well 1 and rehab of well 11. That is just replacement and maintenance funds, so it's CIP funding. IDE interconnect design, that is to connect the two IDE projects, the two small systems we have out west. We were awarded a BOR grant for design. I believe it's 100% paying for the design of that project to connect those two systems. $386, $990 would be grant funding for that. Another increase would be the energy conservation and efficiency services. This is the solar project. As we're starting to get closer and closer to actual construction, we're going to have to do inspection. We're doing some CEQA things as well. You'll see that on our next board meeting, but we needed to increase the CIP fund to account for those costs. And then lastly, the groundwater quality protection program, J2, HI, J and I are all budget adjustments, and a lot of that has to do with redesigning those to make sure they get to the core so we can continue to move with the core in those projects. The Hillary repairs, all three of those projects that are in the budget have been modified. 2 of them increased and 1 of them decreased. Roughly, they put all of their mobilization, we believe, in the first 2 projects, so they came in a little bit higher, and then the last one was a lot cheaper. So if you look at the sheets that are provided, we can go through the capital budget first, since the screen is up already. So if you're looking at the spreadsheet, there's the 2 sheets for the capital improvements. You'll see what's highlighted. The first one you'll see with the regional treatment plan of $2 million. You see the Hurricane Hillary, those 3 projects that were constructed. The reason it's showing 110,000 and 185 and then 155 is because those projects were already modified as part of the original budget process. And then you see the new projects. You'll see the rehabilitation of 2830 benchmark survey, which is part of a USGS project that we're working with, salt nutrient management plan, replacement of the well, see there, and then of course the sewer and the water replacement. So that effectively is the capital improvement changes that we're looking to make. Again, it's over $9 million, but a good portion of that is grant funded. Are there any questions before I go on to anything else?
Any questions? And feel free to just ask as a workshop. I think you can move forward.
Okay, so
I do have one question.
go ahead.
Water main replacements. So those are old ones and we're replacing them. It's gonna cost $2 million? Or, yeah, 2 million?
Yes, and we'll get into more detail of that specific project. Move that over. Yeah,
That's the removing the rear easement.
correct. So that is the specifically, that is the D3 area, which we'll talk about as our third item in this workshop. But yes, there are rear yard easements. And
Okay.
board direction is we're going to try to move those out of rear yard easements and get them in the right of way where they typically would be built today. There's also something that was added during mid-year in just a global ad. $64 million was added at the budget time for all the projects because we figured we have, I think, 17 miles of water main and rear yard easements. So that's a policy that the board has adopted, and we're going to continue to move forward with this. This just happens to be one of the first projects that may be moving forward. It's actually out to bid, and we'll get more detail. The second one right after that is going to be the M2 area. So that's going to be the one that's going to be coming out bidding probably sometime in this quarter.
All right, thank you.
Just quickly, when speaking on that topic exactly, the 64 million, did it already include the 2 million that we've added for this? So should we be deducting 2 million from that, or is this 2 million not something we had originally put into the 64?
It was originally part of the 64 million. I just left that number there because the one thing that we do realize that the costs are going to continue to go up. So if we get to the point where we're getting to a point where we feel really comfortable that whatever number that ends up is accurate, we'll probably then start doing it. But since this program is in its infancy, I just left the 64 million. But yes, it was included.
It was originally part of
included.
all of that. Okay.
Right.
So in effect, we're not adding 2 million. It was already there.
It was already there. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And that 64 is still on line 91.
Correct. Correct. Correct.
The M2 came out of the 64 for the 64 million. I'm sorry, the 64 million that we're referring to was from the Nancy Wright treatment plant for the M2 project. correct?
No, the
So that
60,
came,
that's a $68 million grant that we received. The 64 million is just an estimate of how many rear yard easements. So it's two separate items. However, the M2 water main is going to come out of that $64 million.
okay, I'm good. All right, I got
Yeah.
the sewer and the water.
We're hoping that the
Okay.
water line gets picked up by the grant, but it wasn't specifically in the phase two. So we're going, if it is, then that 64 million will go down, but it won't be any money expended from us. So we're going to continue to work with the state to get the water line improvements completed as well as the roadway plans. So
Okay.
So just looking at the actual expenses, if you will, and just looking at the differences from year to year. And I think the one interesting thing in the revenue side, the base charges, we did not assume any new connections. We did assume a reduction in consumption, but as you saw on our last slide, we actually had a 10% increase. So in reality, we're already going to have a little bit of a increase in our revenues. At least we believe that's what's going to happen. We also assume property taxes would increase just slightly. I think that was also typically 1%, so that's a little bit less than that. So we feel pretty comfortable there. This is also our revised expenses. You can see there are differences in expenses. When I look at this, I know I'm not a finance person, but when I typically look at this, I look at it as my checkbook. So I would throw out the grants. I would throw out as a cost the depreciation. And when you take the grants out and the depreciation, we actually still have positive cash flow, even with the $300,000 that we added to the budget. So from that perspective, we're still bringing in more money than we're spending. And when you look at depreciation and we start talking about some of the capital improvements that we're doing, instead of setting it aside and doing it for a future project, we're actually investing in the system now. So in reality, by removing that, we're not actually being disingenuous. We're actually putting the money immediately back into the system to do some of the removal and replacement. But you do see some of we were talking about employee benefits. You do see a small increase in that. So the expenses have been updated for what we're talking about and adding the 300,000. But again, let's say a $24 million budget, 300,000 is a relatively small amount. So it's a small percentage increase. And just this workshop is intended just for informational purposes and a communication back and forth. You'll see this again at the study session, then of course you'll see it at the board meeting. So I know this is a lot of material, and I just realized that some of you may not have realized that this information was presented in the board packet. So that's on us. We should have informed the board that that information was there, and that's why we didn't have any additional.
I mean, that
handouts.
packet that was this big, right? It's
Yeah.
Somewhere, it's in there somewhere, right?
Yes.
Oh,
One of the things that we have not talked about, but we are looking into, was brought to our attention that maybe we should consider cameras in our vehicles. So we've reached out to some vendors to look at how much that would cost. And if we do come up with that, then we'll bring that to the board for discussion.
Quick question. I'm trying to find, I'm sorry, this is going backwards a little bit.
That's okay.
Mics are hard. The paving for the Nancy Wright facility, I don't see that cost anywhere. Am I missing it?
I do not want to speak out of turn, so I will get that information and come back to you.
Okay. Thank you. I'm sorry. I'm trying to keep track of all
I want to,
related in one area and I'm not seeing it in here.
I don't see it all right off the top because it would be something we've recently added.
Okay.
do, we could switch to the owl as long as everyone's okay speaking without amplification to each other.
okay. Would you speak into the microphone so we can hear what you're saying to our other board member?
If everyone's okay with it, we'll switch to our microphones so that for the recording for Zoom, we'll be using the owl right here in front of Director Duff. And we can all mute our dais microphones as long as everyone can hear each other speaking normally.
Okay.
So the interesting thing is we are adding 2 million, go ahead.
Yes, good morning. The design of the roadway for 19th, 20th and Little Morongo Road, it's in the design phase now, and we're working through the city of Desert Hot Springs on that.
Okay.
So we're not at the stage of getting to the construction phase.
I just thought we knew an approximate budget. I thought it was already in the budget last year, so I was just confused that it wasn't showing on the budget still, because it shouldn't have been removed because it's not done. Right?
Correct. So,
Okay.
and
And it could just be called something different.
well,
so.
I believe if we were to add it, we were going to add it to the Nancy Wright facility, that one line item, because
Okay.
it's part of that. But as I even said it out loud, we probably should break it out separately because it's serving other parcels in that area. So we may have hold on to it. And it's something we're going to dedicate to the city anyway. So
Okay.
we may keep it as a separate item. So I'll work with our engineering staff to make sure if we do have an estimate, that it does make the budget.
Okay. Thank you for that. Sorry to go back a little bit.
No, that's fine. That's a great question. That concludes. Arthur, do you have anything to add to that?
Any other questions on the budget? And again, we'll have Thursday, if you want to look over everything, to ask more questions before we hopefully approve on Monday.
Yes, Tuesday.
Monday's a holiday.
Tuesday. Moving forward to item 6, Regional Water Reclamation Facility Contract Amendment Discussion. General Manager?
Thank you, President Sewell. Before we get into the contract amendment discussions, we asked, as you recall, unfortunately, Director Griffith isn't here. There were a couple of different things the board had concerns with. Concerns with how long it was taking to get paid, and were we following up with it on our end? Was it on the state's end? And the board actually sent Vice President Griffith and myself up there to talk to the state, and when we were there, I think we determined that it was sort of on both ends. They could have done things a lot differently going through COVID. We could have done things a little bit differently on our end. So that's one of the reasons we brought in Mike Nesser and his firm. And he has now gone through and reconciled all of the different things. I know a lot of when we're making our presentations and talking about, let's say, the first disbursement, we always showed that we didn't get $2 million, but then we always said we were going to get that subsequently in further disbursements. He's actually put together a summary table that shows exactly how much money we've received, that we've asked for and received, and how much we haven't received. So from that perspective, I would ask Mike, can you share your screen and take over?
Sure, Brian. Okay, is that showing up?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Director Sewell, members of the board, I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today. For lack of a better word, I kind of did a basic audit of where we stand. I just want to say I did have a lot of good cooperation from the State Water Board and from TKE Engineering on this. They were both very helpful. So what you're seeing up here on the upper left is actually the 6 disbursements that we have received from the state, showing that we've gotten just shy of $44 million to date. And there's about 24.5 million left remaining out of the 68.5 that we started with. Then also, just recently, right before Christmas, we did get an amendment with updated FVA. So I'm also showing where those disbursements are in relation to the categories, whether they're for the phase 1 RWRF or phase 3, the conveyance line, and any change orders and all the soft costs. To show how much we've actually received for each category and what is remaining to be billed in each category. Just I am currently working on wrapping up request 7 to the water board. Should be done and ready to go next week, or hopefully by the end of this week, for about 1.6 million. This is a unique one. One of the things that we've talked about on length is, yes, it does take a while to put these disbursement requests together. So one of the things to look at is, even though like we're doing a request, through July through September, you don't get all the invoices because they all have to be submitted and paid. So it usually takes a month and a half to get all the invoices. And then you have to go through them, put them all together, and then create the package that gets uploaded for the state. So there is to me personally, about a 3-month window. It's like by the end of the next quarter, you should have the previous quarter ready to go and submitted. So I think we're back on track for that at this point. So I want to switch over real quick to the next one where I'm looking at, okay, what did we submit? And I think this has caused some of the issues and confusion with a lot of staff and maybe the board as well. But also looking at here the amount we actually requested for each disbursement request as opposed to what the state approved and what we received. I've just discussed with staff that adjustment on 1 is very, very deceiving, because you have to look per the state. Only the construction costs were included in disbursement request 1. All the change order, construction management, and administration was deferred until disbursement request 2. So there is no rejection of $2 million from the state. It was never really there in the first place. So that has been deceiving, that, hey, we're missing out on $2 million. No, that was put into disbursement request 2. Okay. From that point, though, we did have some things happen where there were, on disbursement request 2, 3, and 4, we had invoices that didn't have receipts, like proof of payment for things like lodging, meals, mileage, other subcontractors' costs. So those were denied, but it can be resubmitted. And right now, that only about just under $101,000. There were some costs that should have been contributed to phases 2 and 3, the M2 and the conveyance line, and disbursement request 2, So those weren't really rejected. They were said, hey, we're not, that doesn't belong here. Those should be in a future request coming up. And then over here on the right is the actual rejected costs by the state for different items, just under $13,000. And a lot of that has to do with markups by sub consultants that the state will not pay for any markups. The state also has limitations on reimbursement for lodging, meals, mileage, and things like that. So even though in the invoice there's X amount for meals, the state reduces that because they have a certain limitation on what they will reimburse. So I'm just looking at it, it's less than 0.1% of what has actually been rejected. So what's coming up right now, and it's taking a little bit longer on request 7 that I'm getting ready to finalize here, is it's all the quarterly costs for that quarter, but also I'm including all of the items that had missing documentation for that $100,000 is also going to be resubmitted in this package. And because of the amendment to the agreement and updated FBA, the first JFSHA invoice for $1.2 million can also be submitted. So that's what's looking to is getting wrapped up right now, getting ready to submit. Also, as part of that amendment, we have phase 3, the conveyance line that is now eligible. I have documentation from January 23 through June of 24 already packaged up and ready to go. Just a little over $6 million. So that will be coming up in future disbursements starting this month as well. So any questions that I can answer for you, I'd be happy to. I have a lot of detail on this where I've gone through invoice by invoice, line by line, looking at where all the deferred and rejected costs were to put this together. And I can discuss those details if you have questions.
Yes, I believe we do. Director Duff, do you want to go first?
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Great. Can you go back to your line 1, the $2 million? You said that it was resubmitted, but on the green part, it says amount to resubmit was 0. So there isn't any indication on this grid that the 2 million went on to invoice request 2. Can you speak further and show details regarding that $2 million that you kind of said was
Right. So that $2 million, this $2 million worth of stuff was included in the $9 million request for request 2, which also went back. If you look at request 1 and request 2, covered the period starting May 1st of 22.
So then that box that said amount to resubmit 0 actually was 2,023,000. Is that correct?
Yeah. What I'm looking at, yeah, I guess, but it was, I guess my thing is that was already resubmitted. We've already been paid for that money.
Okay.
So that's why it's not included. This amount to resubmit is actually missing documentation where we didn't have receipts or mileage or subcontractors invoices or even staff hour sheets that were missing from the invoices. So now that we have those put together, we can resubmit and get that money. So
Okay.
that $2 million from one, it was already in request 2 and we've already gotten it.
Is it easy to say, Mike, that that amount to submit is a current list of things to submit and not past resubmittals?
That would be correct.
Okay. So those are current items to be resubmitted and the
Yeah.
2 million. And when you did your audit, you were able to line by line compare the invoice 1 to invoice 2 to see those line items transferred?
Yes.
Okay. That's it for me at the moment. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Question. Mike, can you just, again, sorry if I missed it, but the difference between the amount to resubmit and then that one column that's the deferred to phase 2 or 3, what the difference is on that 126,000?
Right. So the 126,000 for deferred to phase 2 and 3 will be included in upcoming disbursements for those phases. Because we had an issue where all three phases were in the same invoices, so we had to break those out. So the state denied costs and only paid for phase one costs. So those costs, that 126 that was denied, we're still going to get that. All the phase three stuff is what's coming up right now because we just got the FBA. As soon as the FBA for M2 is approved, then we can submit those. So we will be getting those with future submissions.
And then you mentioned our next request was looking close to 6 million or so.
I have 1.6 million right here for the next request on phase one. I have for phase three, the conveyance line. We were allowed to go back on that one. So I have, when the construction started in January of 23, so far I have invoices and time cards compiled through June of 24. I need still getting the more updated ones from Rita, so I can start including those. But since that's ready to submit now that we have an approved FBA as of last month, the thing is that's quite large, kind of like our disbursement request 2 that was very large and it was caused some confusion with us and the state. So they actually asked if we could break it down into smaller increments. So that 6.5 million for the conveyance line costs will be probably done in 2 or 3 different requests.
And
Just
I
kind of
don't know if you can-
simultaneously for ease of review.
Okay. If you could go back to your first sheet, I think it was
Sure.
20 million that were still 24 million remaining.
Correct.
I guess this is kind of a crystal ball question, but how long do you see our requests pushing out till we fully request everything?
Honestly, that depends on how long it takes us to implement Area M2. So, because in order to invoice the state, we have to have, paid invoices and time cards for that project. So, I would say within 2 to 3 months of project completion, we could have that wrapped up.
And to put that in perspective, we haven't been,
Right.
the state has not authorized us to bid that project yet. And
Right.
what's the time frame on that project?
Since General Manager Macy and Director Vice President Griffith went to the state, we've been following up every other week, and we still don't have approval to go to bid on the M2.
But when we do go to construction, what's the construction duration? Is it 18 months?
17 months, yes.
Yeah, 18 months. So we're looking at probably at least another 2 years.
The updated FBA as December 26 as our new deadline.
To go back a little bit, when we first started, we discovered that there was some date issues in the contract. Did that get corrected? And did that first month and a half of construction get paid?
That is going to be included in the submission I'm going to be submitting this month.
So
And
that'll
it
go,
has, it has been corrected, and we're getting ready to submit that now.
and that'll be in the number 7, or will that be
Yes,
in?
yes, ma'am. It'll be in number 7.
Okay, great.
And that was that 1.6 or whatever it was. Okay.
Yes, yes, sir.
Any questions? I guess of the 40, we've received 43 million. How much do you know have we spent? Like how much are we out of pocket that we haven't received grants for? I know we're looking at renewing that Wells Fargo. Are we getting in a position that we're desperate for the grant funding?
No, so let's say $44 million. If you look to the phase 2 and the conveyance line, those the totals at the bottom of those are $16 million. So if you were to add the $16 million to that number to the 44, you're looking at 60 total. Now, other things are going to go into that: construction maintenance, our own staff time, and things like that. So if those, we know that the conveyance line is pretty accurate, I believe. It came in around the same. What we don't know is the M2. The M2 is the one that's really the one that's going to be the most difficult to. Obviously, there's been a lot of increases in cost and things like that. So from that perspective, that's really the unknown. We need to bid that project so we know exactly where we stand financially in the entire loan. But just looking at the numbers raw right now, we look in pretty good shape.
And again, a crystal ball, if that number does come in much higher for the bid for M2, are we on the hook for that? Or how much does the state have?
So anything over $68 million currently, we were on the hook for, but we will be we will go be back in Sacramento asking if we can get additional funds.
And right now if the 2 million change order is approved, we're at about 73 million total, is that correct?
That I do not know off the top of my head.
That's the running tally I have in my notes, so I'm just trying to make sure we're staying within that.
Well, and the other question you asked earlier about the pavement as well is something we have
And
to
that
add
was
to.
in my numbers, but I'm
Yeah.
not sure.
And we'll have a breakdown for Thursday's meeting.
Stay close, Mike. We're gonna probably be sending a lot of email questions. Thank you
Oh,
for
no-
this
no
detailed
problem.
presentation. I really appreciate the breakdown. I agree. It's been really difficult to grasp without seeing the invoices ourselves, which would be very difficult to do. It's very difficult to grasp which was resubmitted where. And so I appreciate the time that it took for you and all of the staff and TKE to get this produced for us. So I just want to say thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mike. Any other questions?
Not this time.
Anything further from staff or?
Not on this particular issue, but we still have the 2 change order items related to the Nancy Wright facility that we'd like to get started on. Go ahead.
General Manager Macy, if I may, I don't believe I will go double check and have the answer for you affirmative on Thursday, but the assessment district proceeds from AD 15 are not included in the 68 million. And 68 million has 10 million towards into sewer, which at the time we made that cost estimate, created that, we thought that was going to be enough. So we still have, I believe the number was around 4 million or more from assessment district funding that can be applied to this project if we need it. So that should help cover any shortfall we may face as we get out and bid into.
As it relates to just that area, correct?
Correct.
So
Just-
as far as like costs and change orders that we're about to discuss, that money would not be able to be used toward those costs. It would only be able to be used toward the M2, correct?
Yes.
The assessment district funds would only be able to be used for that district.
Correct, but we would be able to move, well, with an amendment with the state, we'd be able to move the money that is in the phase 2 and move it to either phase 1 or phase 3. So the $68 million, we do have flexibility to move between the accounts. So if we do get in a situation where let's say the road, for example, then by using that assessment money that's already been, is already there, if you will, then that would free up those costs to go somewhere else in the project. And by project, I mean all 3 phases.
What happens to that 4 million if we're real lucky and we don't need it? It just stays in the assessment business.
I believe we would not assess them.
Because they haven't paid yet, correct?
Correct. Go ahead, Danny. You're the most familiar with the assessment districts.
It will eventually sunset if we don't levy any of the fees. So if there are eligible costs towards what's identified in the assessment formation part of that, then we would assess. If not, they will sunset at the balance of 10 years.
Thank you. Ready for the change
Yes,
order?
so let's do the change order first. Why don't you just introduce everybody so everybody knows who's.
Hey, good morning. Today we are joined by several representatives from TKE Engineering. We've got Shelby, Steve and Terry Renner from TKE. And from Answer, we have Luke and David as well. So can you bring up my PowerPoint, please? And it's this slide here is what I'm looking for. So while General Manager Macy's bringing that up, what you all should have is a copy of a letter, a 13-page description, detailed description from TKE It looks something like this without the highlighting on it, of course, thank you. And this is also included in this week's agenda packet, and it has some detailed information as attachments with budget.
You're doing the Shea contract, right?
I'm sorry, you're right. Go down to this one, please. Great. So with the JF Shade contract, their original contract cost, there's a few items in their change order that we're going to be discussing. And this is also going to be discussed in this week's study session. So there are 4 change order items, and I'll just briefly touch on them. And if you have any questions, feel free to either ask me or representatives from TKE. Next slide, please. Thank you. So for the potential change order number 38, burrowing owl impacts, originally they proposed a change order cost of $295,000. And I believe there was a meeting in November of 2024 where the general manager, TKE, and representatives from the contractor met, and they negotiated not only this cost, but other costs as well that I'll be getting into. And so after negotiation and further drilling down on some details, we were able to secure a $74,000 savings on this. And so the basis of those negotiations was that quantity that was used in JF Shays included quantities for the entire project. And so it focused on inefficiencies of work that pertain only to areas directly affected by the burrowing owl constraints, and work which is associated with the construction for the infiltration. So that's where a lot of the burrowing owl issues were when they were grading and constructing the infiltration basins. Next slide, please. Thank you. So for potential change order number 80, there was an overall impacts due to time-related overhead. So again, after negotiation and after discussion, JF Shea came to the table with almost a little over $1.5 million in those costs, and staff with TKE's help as well were able to negotiate them down to with a savings of $464,000. And so the basis of those negotiations considered actual extra working days and critical activities versus JF Shea's claimed days, which include time for procurement. So that was taken out. And it also includes an extra of 20 man weeks to complete the project up until 2025 due to the conveyance line delays.
Before we go to the next slide, one of the questions that I did receive from the board relating to this particular item was there were references in the document talking about photos and project documentation. We have that documentation, and we have, I don't know, in a quick count, over 1,200 photos and inspections every single day for the entire by multiple folks. So if we would like to go through any of those, or you'd like to review those, we do have those on this computer, and we can bring any of those up. If you just want to see the file structure to see the number, that's okay too. I just wanted to make reference that we do have that information available if the board would like to look at it in any capacity.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
It says here also an extra 20 man weeks. Are we speaking of 1 man at 40 hours for 20 weeks, or how do you come about 20 man weeks?
That is the Shays operation of man weeks. So that's their entire operation to complete the rest of the project is 20 man weeks of their staff. I don't know how many. I think it's 3 days.
Yeah, but they're considered, incorporates their crew to finish out the project, so.
Or is there, so it could be 2 men or 15 men?
It's predominantly 2 men, their project manager, Rafael Torres, and then their
He's the commissioning.
And Rahul, who's the commissioning officer, who's gonna be in charge of making sure all the parameters are set correctly and it's functioning properly. So that primarily includes just those two people, but the ability to bring on, staff as needed for any other issues that come up once they, flip the switch and turn everything on and see what anything needs to happen or change.
And if I'm not mistaken, these were the ones that were estimated. Because they don't know exactly how long it's gonna take, but we only wanted to bring one change order to the board. So when you see estimate in the change order, it's because they're taking it out to a certain time frame that they thought it may take, but we're only gonna get billed for the time that they actually use.
That particular timeframe also, it's a not to exceed value also.
So we're covered either way. They're not gonna go over that amount, but they're also, if they don't use the time because it is, everything stays on schedule, then hopefully it'll be a little bit less than that.
I think one of the things that's confusing is, in all these presentations that we've had over the years, I've never heard the term man weeks before. So it's a little confusing.
But yeah, it was when I was reviewing it. That's just how Shay calculated their cost, projection, yes, and cost per time frame of extended time due to the delays.
Okay. And the next change order item for JF Shea Construction would be the electrical subcontractor time-related overhead. So during negotiation, JF Shea, the contractor, presented a cost of $206,000. The negotiated cost is $93,500 with a savings of $113,200. So during negotiation, the basis was focused on the additional scope of work required and during the critical path timeline. And Baker Electric, which is, I believe, is a sub to JF Shea, and JF Shea attended to meet to confer and discuss the details of the cost referenced above and settled on the negotiated amount. Potential change order number 82 refers to adverse and direct cost inefficiencies. So JF Shea proposed a cost of $428,000. It was negotiated down to $269,000 with a savings of $158,000. So in terms of basis of negotiation, JF Shea claimed 77 weather days minus the 15 contract weather days for a total of 62. So considering the critical path schedule, the project team argued that 35 of those weather days were valid, minus the 15 contract weather days would be another 20. And when I say weather days, a majority of them, I believe, were based on high wind. And that affected the crane operators from moving materials like roofing and things like that around the site. And so MSWD agreed to split in that negotiation the remaining 42 weather days based on historical data provided by JF Shea, resulting in an additional 21. So 20 days plus 21 weather days is equal to 41 weather days, and I believe that's what this change order will accommodate for.
Sorry, question. And I don't know if I'm just missing it for some reason. Maybe I need another cup of coffee, but didn't you deduct 15? So wouldn't it be 41 less 15?
The 15 comes out of, so the 15 weather days was in the contract. It was allotted in the questionnaire. So the 15 we already subtracted from the second bullet point. We have 35 weather days we argued were valid. That's just due to a critical path. We're saying that the other amount of weather days weren't valid due to them working on other items during that day, and we don't feel that it was warranted a full days of work that they lost. So the 35 of those 62 weather days, or I guess it would be the 77, we said were valid, minus the 15 contract would be the 20 weather days.
And then, so the remaining 42 that we had, that, or what is it? The remaining 42, we're saying that JFSHA provided, historical data that proved that, their claim was that the site was susceptible to weather days of high wind and stuff more than what we allowed them to or allotted with the 15 weather days. So we agreed to split that additional 42 days with them, which results in the 21.
So then in fact, JFSHA did not agree with us that there were 35 days. So we did the 35 days and then added and then split the difference. Is that basically what happened in the negotiation?
Yes, yeah, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And like Shelley said, they were still able to work in the mornings, and then when the afternoon wind kicked up, that was some of the issues and why we felt that splitting the days made a little bit of sense because they were still working half of those days that they were claiming. Is that true?
Yes, correct.
Continue, Eric, I'm sorry.
No problem. So to summarize, there was a change order negotiation process in November. Notification letters were sent from the contractor to MSWD per the project specifications and per the rules on that. And so they requested a change order request. They requested the project team to study their change order requests. And a response to the change order request was done by MSWD. Now, if there's no resolution, the request for informal conference regarding a disputed claim will be needed, so there'll be additional negotiations with the contractor. If no resolution, request for formal mediation by the contractor, or if no resolution, then there'll be a civil action by the contractor. So for JFSHA's original cost was little over $2.5 million, and the negotiated cost is $1.698 million with a savings of $809,000 for these change order requests.
Can I ask one more
Yes,
question?
please.
Is the contractor set? Are these negotiations done?
Yes.
Is this as far as they're willing to go? So if the board were to decide that we disagree with any of these negotiated terms, you would be proceeding with your legal action, is that correct?
Yes.
There's no further negotiation. What we see is what we get from JFSHA, is that correct?
The step we're at was the informal conference, and that was the additional negotiations. When they submitted their original change order request, we had denied a vast majority of what you see here. But based on our follow-up informal conference with the contractor, we're not confident that we will come out 100% ahead. So that's what led to the additional negotiation. So if we deny the claims that they have or that we're presenting today, their next step is to either go to formal mediation or to pursue a civil claim.
Do they have to go to mediation first? Is that part of the contract?
No, I think the relationship we have with JFSHA, the partnering work we've done over the duration of the project would afford us an opportunity to go back and say, hey, is there an opportunity to sharpen our pencils, you know, here or there? So I think that opportunity is still on the table.
So then that is still a possibility from the numbers we see here.
Correct. I just want to be clear, if we go back and say we're rejecting all of these, they will pursue the next step. But if we go back and say, hey, we're being directed, you know, by the board and management to further negotiate this, then I think we have that, they'll afford us that opportunity.
Okay, thank you for helping clarify that.
What it's worth in the negotiations with the project manager, when we came up with these numbers, he stated to me that he had some pushback from his upper management. So I would be inclined to think that there would be sharpening the pencil is going to be pretty tough on these.
I just, in looking at some of what I did get to see, and when I met with General Manager Macy and looked at some of the letters here included, it's not much, but there's still about $300,000 that doesn't seem to make sense to me. And I'm trying to understand it, and I'm trying to understand the justifications given, and I will sit later and look at what General Manager Macy offered, but I'm seeing more of like 1.3, not 1.7. And I'm just being honest with what I've seen in what I've reviewed. Thank you.
Question? No. I guess my question is, was the negotiation done by our staff and TKE, or was it TKE on our behalf?
It was, I believe it was MSWD staff with TKE along with the contractor.
Okay, and just a hypothetical, if we were to deny, and it did go to civil action, they could be requesting that 2.5. I mean, the negotiations that got us to this point, could they go back? So, okay. I think that's all I have for this, for the JFJ.
I would, I don't know how we can do it now, but there's 20 man weeks, I'd like to see it changed to man hours. I've never seen a contractor, usually contractors know exactly how many man hours it's gonna take, and they don't do it in weeks. So I would like to get that fixed, corrected, I should say. Thank you.
We have a working days. We have it broken down into days and then develop the man weeks. But we could check into that.
If we have that data and we can get that converted to hours, we'll just have to work the details.
I did it in my head already, but I'm not sure where you're at with who's being paid what.
I do have one more question now that we're sitting here with everyone else done. I know.
Yeah, I do believe,
They're answering.
and their final numbers, they just used man weeks so they could show the weekly charge based on how many weeks the project's gonna be pushed out. So if we can get you that number, if that's what
If
you
we know
want.
how many, if it's two, then we already know that's approximately 1,600 man hours. If we have two workers there, right? 40 hours a week.
So,
Yeah, they break it down per like for PCO 80, which is the time related overhead impacts. They break it down per delay that they had, and then like there's a chart in their original PCO. This is the original one, so the numbers are a little inflated because we knocked them down, but they do break out JFJ man hours, sub man hours, and then total man hours.
You understand what I'm saying here? Then
Yeah.
Director Duff is finding a little bit of conflict there with the numbers there. And so if we don't know what we're talking about when it comes to actual man hours, then Director Duff may have a very valid point there. We're not sure where we're at here with.
She always does.
We haven't then.
I do have one more concern. And this may be for our staff or for Mike Messer. Because a lot of this is already performed work, right? All of these change orders have already been done with the exception of what you're estimating to be to complete to June, correct? We obviously have not been able to submit that to the grant then if we didn't even approve receiving their invoicing, correct? So we haven't been paid from the grant for these things because we haven't been able to submit to the state because we don't have approved invoices for these actions. Is that correct? I didn't mean to stump you, and I don't know who's supposed to answer.
We never paid JFJ for these change orders.
Yeah, so
Right,
Yeah.
but did we collect from the state for these actions?
No.
So all of these, everything in this change order would have to be submitted to the state, correct?
Correct, that's correct.
And all of these items are 100% approvable by the state according to the state's payment
Yes.
contract. There's no soft costs included in here that they would deny, or travel costs that they would deny, or hotel costs or meal costs, right?
Correct. The per diem was on the soft cost side or the CM side of the equation.
And that's not part of this 1.6.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further on JFJ? Come in. Thank you, Eric.
Just so everybody is aware, all the change orders are a part of the agenda package. So the specific letters that were provided by Shay, as well as the response letter by the CN team, are both in there as well. So just, if there's any additional questions, please let me know between now and then. We're still going with the TK one, right?
Let's do TK.
Okay.
Very good. So you all should have this 13-page letter. There are attachments, and I believe those attachments are included in this week's study session agenda packet. I'm just going to be touching on the items, and all of those items for TKE's contract amendment are discussed in detail here. So just to give everybody a little perspective, originally TKE's contract for construction management and inspection was executed back in November of 2021. And then when that contract was executed, MSWD staff, I believe the general manager at the time, along with TKE staff, came in and they negotiated the cost of TKE's contract down to $3.6 million. So TKE, since that time, they've been working on the regional plan, the conveyance line as well. And during that time, they've encountered several issues like the burrowing owl, Southern California Edison's easement issue for the conveyance line, and total those among other items of the amendment, it equates to about $1.23 million. So assuming that this is approved, the total amended budget for TKE would be $4.9 million, which falls well below the allowable soft costs that are reimbursable by the state. And those soft costs identified by the state is $7.35 million. So the total budget increase includes completion of the Wright Regional Reclamation Facility, the completion of the conveyance line project, as well as the M2 septic to sewer project.
Can I stop you?
Yes, please.
Can you go back that one screen? I'm sorry. Thank you. So if we were to approve this and be at almost 5 million, that only leaves 2.3.5 for all the remaining soft costs. How many other contractors, including our staff, have soft costs? And do we know the total of that?
I believe in this week's agenda packet, it includes a budget augmentation that takes care of staff time as well as other soft costs.
Would all of it fall under the 2.35 that would be remaining?
Well, we'll have to look into that to see exactly how it all divides, because I know the M2 is going to be a big portion of that, but we talked through some of those issues today. So we'll put together a spreadsheet that shows how much money is in each pot, if you will, and then add in the M2 assessment if we choose to go down that path. Make it better.
Thank you.
Something better.
Sorry for interrupting.
Excuse me, for Thursday.
Great question. So again, this list of change order items is within that packet. So I can just hit on a couple of the high items. Burrowing owls was number one. There were more stringent, and there's more, since the project started, more stringent burrowing owl guidelines were established by the state. Likewise, the monitoring wells is the second bullet item. I believe once we received the bid from the contractor, JF Shea, to start construction on the regional plant, the state came back and asked MSWD to put in 3 monitoring wells. If you all remember, later last year, we finally completed the last monitoring well because we needed to relocate it as a result of the state changing the location that we initially identified. So, and there was an easement associated with that. TKE helped manage and basically be the pointy end of the stick for the district. Southern California Edison, there's an easement issue along the conveyance line project, and that is being worked out. And again, all of this is discussed in detail in this letter, or in this description from TKE. Another notable item is Tropical Storm Hillary. There were some design modifications that were needed because of Tropical Storm Hillary washing out and changing the elevation of the Mission Creek Channel. If you remember, the conveyance line went from the east along Dillon to the west, where it intersected, where it then turned south on Little Morongo Road. So as it crossed the channel, that channel elevation changed. So TKE worked on a redesign for that, a conveyance line. Another item that wasn't anticipated was the city of Desert Hot Springs requiring the district to get they wanted to review the building and safety plan, the plans for the regional plant. MSWD is a county water district and we're self-permitting. So it was our belief, and we're correct, in that we did not need to go through the building and safety plan check process with the city. There was some back and forth, and of course there were some costs associated with that. And TKE represented the district in that effort to get those waived. Not going into all of the detail for all of these items, the total dollar value, which would be grant reimbursable, is about $1.229 million for this contract amendment with TKE. So it will adjust the contract amount from 3.6 to $4.9 million. Again, this is soft costs that are reimbursable by the state grant. And the allowable soft cost by the state is $7.35 million.
That was actually amended in the amendment. It's only 5.38 million.
It went down.
It was adjusted in the last amendment. But again, we'll be asking, we talked about it. If we go over, we'll be asking for more. Hopefully there'll be a second amendment. There's other things that we want to do, like the road and things of that nature, but we'll bring a more detailed spreadsheet on Thursday.
And sorry if I missed it. You just said the soft cost went down to
5.38
is the max we can give through the grant. Right?
For soft costs.
So then there's only like not even $1 million left.
But this would take us all the way through construction of not only.
But isn't there more companies that have soft costs? TKE isn't the only.
No, all of this includes everything.
This is everybody.
Yeah.
There's no one else that can submit.
Except for, I apologize, my Nussers team, that there's no other consultants or contract or from the CM side needed for M2.
So it would just be our staff.
Yep.
Also, Director, there's a separate pot for Mission Springs staff allocated time as well. And Mission Springs staff has barely used any of that pot.
Yeah, I don't think we've transferred any funds or anything. Okay, thank you. How long was the delay due to city?
It was several months. It was early part of 2023.
Arguing over something they didn't even have authority?
It was late 22, and we went back and forth with them into mid 23.
And they were arguing over something they didn't even technically have authority to insert.
Yes, but the benefit that came out of that is we did get the fire chief to review and ultimately made upgrades to the plans and the fire suppression system to ensure it met exactly what Riverside County would want. At the end of the day, they wouldn't sign off on the project because they had, for reasons we don't need to get into, but ultimately we did do upgrades to the plant for the fire system as a result of that process, albeit at a delay to the contractor and the overall project timeline.
Okay, thank you.
And then I'm just looking at that section of your letter. Is the 10,175, is that the only,
What page is that?
page 8 of 13? Is that the cost for the peeling to the city? Totally? Or is that just for?
Yes, that's.
Yeah, that's
that.
Go ahead.
Yes, it says city building permit right, RWRF, that's what we're talking about.
Okay.
And that was the cost paid to the city, not the cost of TKE. That's what's being added here, as well as our staff that didn't get reimbursed yet.
No, ma'am, the 10,175, I believe is paid to TKE.
That's your cost.
Yes.
Okay.
Any questions? I haven't been through.
One more. All of the change order items, they're all 100%. I'm gonna ask you the same question I asked JF Shea. They're all 100% reimbursable from the state. So there's none of those costs that they're gonna decline or deny or reduce, right?
Correct. And one thing that they have done is that Mike Nusser mentioned earlier is they have capped per diem expenses, and we've made sure to include that in here. There's a hard cap of $95 a day on any per diem expenses for any of the subs. It was predominantly from the biologists. Given the presence of burrowing owl throughout the project areas, including on-site, the one we had to relocate on the treatment plant property, and the several active nests along the conveyance line, they, in certain months, had to do daily monitoring, which had, all the per diem costs associated with it. So ultimately, I think we're in a little bit better shape going into M2 that we've now at least capped that at what the state will reimburse to ensure that there's no overages from that perspective.
Thank you.
I'm not a big fan of burrowing owl.
I have a couple at my house.
I just look at, just about every section, you do have the totals to that 1.23 is in each section. Just so if you want to see the breakdown of each. I know the JFJ one was nice and easy. These are the 4 categories and this is how much. But each of these categories that you see on your slide, the totals are in. Yeah.
And President Sol, those totals are actuals. And then the last couple pages is the projected.
Okay. So
all those are the actuals. And then I just want to point out on page 12, under area M2, the 4th bullet, we do clarify the changes that were made with the burrowing owl species this last year at the state level. It's now a listed species. That would potentially require a incidental take permit with the CDFW. So we know that while they're not going to be in the roadway of area M2, they may be in some of the vacant lots. So there's going to be extra biological monitoring and coordination with the state if and when that inevitably happens. So we've established a budget, but we don't know, if there's one burrow and one owl, that's, easy to get through. If there's 100, that's a different story. So
Can we ask the biologist to figure out how to tell them to stay on the conservation lands across the street and leave our stuff alone?
and as far as the rear easements go, I don't know the correct term, but we don't need to go in the rear easements, right? Those are just basically abandoned. When we're not having to go through all those rear easements and tearing up.
No,
So hopefully that will avoid some.
we'll have to be back there to do a couple of different things, meter boxes and things like that to get it below grade. But it won't be, I don't believe, as intrusive as going through and hogging everything out and tearing it up. So we'll be able to be selective unless we have a burrowing out in one of our meter boxes.
We're gonna leave all that old piping in the ground?
That's an industry standard.
Yeah, abandoned in place. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll second or third that is an industry standard. There is no requirement to remove, but what I'll add is in rear easement relocations like this, we had the discussion of who would connect the customer. So part of the work would be that we would have to remove the meter location move it to its new location, and then we would have to come through the property and tie back in towards the rear of the property so the flow comes in. And then anything at surface, valve cans, meter boxes would be part of the removal and demolition.
And would you say that if we were to go outside of that standard, which I'm not suggesting by any means, if you were to remove all those pipes, you would be required to restore the ground to how it was prior to constructing those, correct? So that is not that's a stopper as far as wanting to do that, correct?
Yeah, so if we were, wherever we are, if it's an easement, the street, whatever we have to remove is, whatever work would take to remove it, we would be restoring everything back to some
Original.
sort of condition. That it was.
Thank you.
Either the same or better.
Backfilling in the ditch and letting the weeds grow back up is what it would amount to.
Any other questions on TKE amendment? And will TKE have someone here on Thursday, just in case we have more? Okay. Great. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, everyone. Check. Item 7, groundwater quality protection program, AD 18D3 discussion. General Manager.
Thank you, President Sewell. Really, this is just for informational purposes. When we were looking at the cost estimates and how we were breaking down the area, the construction, we do have grant funding. Typically, we want to look at a 50-50 match, but when we got the cost estimate from the engineer, they were higher than we expected. And what that does is it will require us, if we want to stay with a 50-50 max, we either have to reduce some of the project and use those many grant funds as we have, or Mission Springs would have to then put some money towards the project. So Eric, go ahead and provide some context to that.
Great, thank you, Kurt. Just to give everybody some perspective on this, currently the area D3 septic to sewer project has been seen by the board back in April of 24, as well as September, October of April of 2024 as well. And so the septic to sewer portion is being designed by AECom, and the water line removal out of the easements is being designed by TK.
It's not removal, it's abandonment.
I'm sorry. I must apologize. I'm a former public works guy, and public works typically removes stuff. The district takes it a little bit more efficiently and just leaves it in the ground. Okay, so this is just an overall GQPP map of what we have. And if you look closely, you can see D3 there. It's in pink. And again, this has been seen by the board last year. And then there's other areas that are in process of being either designed or developed. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, so this is an overall area of D3. And there's about 102 properties. There are 102 properties that will be affected, and those include 20 vacant properties. And so as part of this D3 scope of work, there's 2 grants involved. And one is for almost $77,000. So it's a 1-for-1. We have to, for every dollar that we get in the grant, we have to spend as well. So, so that grant expires March 31st of this year. And the most notable grant associated, the second one, is $875,000. And the deadline for that, to use that grant, is December of this year. So again, 102 properties, and the purple properties there are vacants. Go ahead, please. Now this is kind of like a little side trip. This shows all of the water lines that exist now, and you'll see, say the street between Cactus and San Marcos, as well as San Marcos and San Juan. there's homes on both sides of the street, but right, cutting through those chunks of residences, those properties, is those easements, and that's where those water lines are. And so staff decided that, well, heck, we're in the area, we're doing septic sewer, let's do this this water line. Let's address these water lines that are in these easements now. Excuse me. Next slide. So in going through the costs and going through some of the kind of getting some estimates, we pulled some old numbers, brought them up to today's numbers. And so we found that there could be a range of values and there could be a range of costs that we get when we receive these bids. So looking ahead, what we tried to do is say, okay, look, assuming we get, say, $940 per linear foot of sewer, what can we do? So here you'll see that 37 total properties will be affected, and we can only basically do the septic to sewer conversion along Cactus. And then couple that with, while we're there, let's do some water line improvements there to get rid of some of those easements, the water lines that are in the easements. That would equate to about $720,000. So the cost to do the septic to sewer would be $1.5 million. The grant minus the grant, that the delta on that would be $621,000 for AD 18 proceeds. And then, as General Manager Macy alluded to, the district would need to come up with an additional $331,000. So it's not an assessment district grant 50-50 type of relationship. It would be a little more. And I believe several years ago, the district did area D2 and then ran into a similar situation. Back then, the board approved going, I think it was $200,000. That was over the 50-50 split. So let's see. So this is the scenario one. Let's go to the next slide, please. Scenario two, same, except we're adding 12th Street, East Side 12th Street. This one we looked at yesterday, and since then we've found that this one might not be a viable alternative, given that there's a water line that goes, I guess you see my mouth. Never mind. I guess there's a you see the colored parcels at the bottom, the lower left right hand corner. Those we're going to be adding to Cactus to do septic to sewer. So we would also be interested in, we wouldn't be able to do the water line elimination of the water line because there's an easement that goes through there that serves houses that aren't going to be affected, that aren't going to be worked on. And so this one kind of fell out of consideration. Next slide.
Real quick, Eric,
Yes.
sorry. Isn't that the same for the homes on the south side of Cactus, there towards the top? Isn't there an easement between those and the homes on the north side of San Marcos?
There is, but we would do a water line from
You'd all be
Cactus and 12th and all the way up Cactus. And then I believe, Danny, would it connect to
We would
Palm?
tie into Palm, so there would be there would be water line trench that would go from the right side of the purple into Palm.
Okay.
Or lavender, whatever color.
But then those homes on the north side of San Marcos that are still in white, those would still use that rear easement for their water supply until we.
Yeah, that's a great question. Some of the things that we talked about, some of the things that are being talked about right now in concept have implications. If we do a water line replacement like you're talking about, that easement can't be abandoned between San Marcos and Cactus because it still feeds the north side of San Marcos. So those are some of the things that we're working through. It's just that if we're gonna disturb the area, like pulverize the asphalt for sewer, then it makes sense to put a water line in there. Although it doesn't meet our ultimate goal and eliminate everything, unfortunately.
It gets us closer.
It gets closer.
I agree with your thought process on that. It makes more sense than the down below to do all of San Marcos and Cactus in one, like do that whole upper.
And I
I
think
see what you're saying.
Yeah, the important thing about this is we're bringing different scenarios and we'll have to work through this based on the price that we get from the contractors. If we get, you'll see here as we continue to go through some of these scenarios, as the price gets lower, we're able to do more and more to the point where we're able to do almost the entire area. With very little input for impact on our budget, if you will. And if that case, then yes, we would add a lot to the water line and do everything. But yeah, in reality, we'll have to go through it and evaluate exactly what those costs are. Because one of the things that are set up right now, because there's two separate contracts, if you will, how do we pay for the pavement? Is it just the trench on the sewer and the entire road and everything on the water line? Because we're doing it differently and we're going across the road. Those are the kinds of things that we have to work through and negotiate with the contractor once it's decided. So those are all great questions and we'll have better clarity, if you will, once we know how much we can actually accomplish.
And then there was one grant that was like March 31st. As long as we move a project forward before then.
We believe that we can get an extension. That's our hope.
I have a suggestion for better clarity. When we're talking about easements, if we can establish that if it's an easement that has dirt, some of them are like 8, maybe 10 feet wide and they're all dirt. And others, you can drive a car down which have asphalt in the easements.
The clarification of what you're referring to is north of Mission Lakes. Those are alleyways and considered right of way and shown that way in the cities and the water districts maps.
So they're all asphalt is what we're talking about.
Correct, but they're also right of way. They've even, yeah, so the easements that we're referring to are, easement where there are 5 and 5, each property gives up a 5-foot easement of their property. They have a power line that goes through.
And those are all dirt.
They are.
That's where the confusion starts coming in.
No, I was saying
When
the
you're
only,
looking at the cost, you know, we're talking about dirt or asphalt.
yeah,
And
the only area that we have pavement and easement that recognizes actual alleyways are north of Mission Lakes. Between Verbena and West, and majority more asphalt. But those are, they're recognized as actual city of Desert Hot Springs right of way.
yeah, there's a couple off of Mission Lakes and Palm Drive also there.
Yeah, Verbena to West.
All right, thank you.
My estimate on a sewer cost per property, $680 a year, is that still accurate? 680 is the tax, the bill that goes for the sewer every year, each customer.
Yeah, that's
That's about right, yeah.
646.
Okay.
Now that's for the sewer service, not necessarily part of this.
No, I'm just trying to like in my head calculate if we gained 70 customers, how much would that add a year? You know,
Gotcha.
just trying to like calculate our expense versus how much we would gain.
Yes, roughly 53 times 12, that's added, but, and you're referring to the monthly service fee.
The
for-
sewer, yeah, the sewer, like, because these people all have septic, right? So if we're gaining them as customers, kind of softens the blow of the water expense when you know that
There is
this
a
is
rate
the
of return.
added, this
Yeah.
is the added benefit. But I was just calculating in my head. Thank you.
Okay, so this is the third scenario, and I think we can get a little bit more bang for the buck on this one. Assuming that the costs come in at $470 per foot of sewer line installed. And in this particular case, the district would need to contribute $302,000 over and above, you know, the grant and our share for the 50/50 assessment district range. If you look down at the bottom, it'll say $2.014 million for water line improvements. That pretty much falls in line with what General Manager Macy mentioned earlier on in this meeting. And so, let's see. So that's where we're at in terms of scenario three and like, you good?
I like scenario three.
And the balance, amount per lot, that is what each
Yes.
homeowner would be paying.
Well, that would be their, assessment.
No,
No?
the idea there is this is a great, it's this entire project. So there's a number, there's an applied grant, there's a balance. And then what we were trying to apply is the proceed. So if you take, the takeaway here is $302,000 roughly is what the district would have to pay in order for that project to be a reality if we were to receive engineering or in bids at $470 per foot. We just broke it down as just another way to look at it. There's 102 lots, so it's about $2,900 in investment or commitment rather to that project, but it's still $302,000.
So the 815 divided by however many properties is what?
It's the balance of $302,000. So you see the last underlined is 302. So I'll walk through it really quick. There's a project total of $2,070,000. Apply a grant of $951,000. It leaves you a balance of $1.1 million. Apply the proceeds from the entire assessment area D3, which then leaves you a balance of 302. That net is what the district would have to come up with in order for that project to happen in the scenario that's being presented. It's just further broken down to 102 lots.
I guess what I was getting at is that 815 is what would be divided amongst the assessment district and go on to.
No, it's 1.1 minus 815, which is currently the assessment that's in place. If we were to levy what is actually in place for these parcels, 102 lots, that would be the proceeds that we would receive and able to receive over the next 20 years and towards from the tax roll. Once we levied that.
Basically, it's $8,000 a lot. That's what the assessment was agreed to when we passed this assessment. So that's what we're calculating in almost $8,000 per lot.
It's a range, but we'll use $8,000 a lot. Everybody in this assessment area has a certain amount of money. If they're a single family dwelling, multifamily dwelling, but for conversation's sake, let's just say 8,000. That's where the proceeds come from. That is, if we were to, you asked a question earlier, if we were not gonna, what if we didn't spend that $4 million? What would happen to it? And I said it would sunset. Well, in this assessment, 8018, day 3 is we're hoping to build a project, and if we do, then we'll levy what the assessment amount is. In this case, that's what 815 is. If you take that from the balance, so you take the grant away from the project total, then you take the assessment district proceeds from the balance, you're left with $302,000. And another way to look at it is 2,900. I think the bigger, I was fortunate to have a conversation with Eric and his team, and they brought me into this. If you go to the scenario 1, if you were to back up 2 slides, and this is what Brian was, or sorry, Area Manager Macy was referring to earlier, is if you see the same scenario is, if it was to come in at the engineer's estimate at 940, we could build a lot less, and that's what Eric has been talking about. But that project right there commits $331,000 for a far less of a project. So what we're really saying is if the board is in agreement, then we can determine once the bids come in what project we're really going to do. But we really have to understand if the board is in agreement to want to put additional funding towards these projects. So if it comes in any one of these scenarios, number 2, which is 3/4 of the engineer's estimate, we can do more project. If it comes in scenario 3, which is, it might be a pipe dream, but I was entertaining the idea, and it could be, I love it, but it's 50% of what the engineer's costs come in at, and we can do obviously the whole thing, but yet we still have to put money for it. So scenario 1 says if we're okay with the concept, we could put as much as 331 and you may have seen in scenario 2. It's more than scenario 2, so if scenario 1's good, then scenario 2 must be great, right? If scenario 3 is less, that means we should still be able to do scenario 3. So we won't know until the bids come in, until everything kind of shakes out. That's the takeaway here is I think what I just want to reiterate is, and I'll say this just maybe to preemptively say this, has the board ever approved something like this?
They have approved it in Area D2. It's the first time that we've done it, and it's, I don't want to say it's set a precedence, but it has been done. It was for 286 lots, however, and it was less than what we're estimating right now. But that just provides some history. So
I
I'll
have
shut up.
a question on there because and it hasn't come up in this conversation on there, but, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't this require approval from the residents on there? That's a subject matter that has come up a number of times, trying to get the homeowners and stuff collectively to agree to this. And I'm wondering, is that still the situation or has it changed? You know what I'm talking about?
Jeremy, you want to take it?
Go ahead.
I know there was some conversation, there was a lot of activity up at Mission Lakes Country Club about whether or not they wanted to support sewer lines coming in or remain without them, and they voted by a slim majority that they wanted the sewer lines in. So I just was curious as to whether or not that's still the case.
I believe I know what you're asking. So all of our assessment areas within 8018 have a prioritization. We're focusing on that priority level now. We'll go to the next area. So the assessment district has passed and there is proceeds that we would collect since we're talking about this area, which equals 815. There is no more additional discussion that would be had with the residents in that area because the discussion is essentially bringing light to, we would need to put forth more money. To tie it to what you were thinking about with Mission Lakes Country Club, is they wanted to be higher on the priority level. And in order to do that, the option would be is we could reevaluate their area and maybe instead of a 50% matching type scenario that we have in 8018, they can likely fund the entire project. But that's a little bit different than what we're talking about here. We're just talking about, we've got grant money, we've got proceeds, and based on engineer's estimate, we need more money. And if we're lucky and the bids come in lower, we're still gonna need more money, but we're gonna be able to do the whole area, which is a benefit to our groundwater protection program and many other things. In this case, also bringing the water lines out of the easement, which is a sister project to this.
And off the top, do you know when this assessment district sunset?
Off the top of my head, no, but I think Mary,
I mean, the benefit for us to put some money forward is to utilize that grant money
Before
and
it's
not have to be
2028.
2028.
8018 was passed in November of 2019, and we have
Yes,
10,
and
and was reported in January of 2020, and we have 10 years to build it before it sunsets.
Can I make one comment just to kind of ask everyone to keep in their mind as a home? We do not want to split this up to where there's potential where the same neighbors would have to deal with construction twice, maybe 4 or 5 years apart, but we don't want to do that. So when you're doing these scenarios, I would just say that if you're going to include part of the property on scenario, I think it was 2 or maybe, yeah, 2. If you were going to include that upper part of San Marcos, I would say we have to find a way to do the bottom half, because to disrupt all of those people that live there to do the construction behind their yards for that time period, to then only do half after you disturb them all. I just would ask that we keep that in mind as we're deciding what to do, and that we try to minimize the impact on the residents' construction inconvenience when we're making these decisions.
It's kind of a slippery slope though, right?
It is.
Because once you do San Marcos, the front, then you're saying.
Well, no, because the San Marcos block with the easement, you're not disrupting them.
But you would be disrupting the north.
Yeah.
Because you'd be in the street here doing construction, so these guys would be.
True, I guess,
And
but
it kinda
I guess it would be easier to tell the public, like, we can do this, then we can do this one, like block by block. But to do just a half, I would be so annoyed if I lived there.
Director President, so you're correct, that domino effect, as I was motioning to the general manager, is if we did San Marcos, then the north side of San Juan would be in the same boat. Okay, well then, let's do San Juan
And
Well,
then
that's the north side of it. So we would end up, we looked at that, and I do agree. The best that we can is not to disturb them twice. I think the word, in this scenario, just on the screen, once we're in that easement, the north side of San Marcos is probably not going to be much. We're gonna go in there, and since we can't abandon the main, we're going to go to all the services that go to their backyards on the south side of Cactus. And simply tie them over and then remove their meter boxes, and we'll be out of there. We're still gonna
I
have a
knew it's-
water main in there.
Part of your thought process. I'm just asking that we remind ourselves to keep that in mind when we're looking at the money part, to look at the people that live there also.
Yeah.
And figure out how we can try to make it best for both. That's all.
Yeah, there's two components. One is the pavement concern and also the access to the property. So if we're going to be in there doing a sanitary connection, doing the water connection is really the easier part of those two. So yes, if we were only to do Cactus and did not do San Marcos, then yes, we would only do the sewer to Cactus and the water line to Cactus as well. So we would not be impacting those. But to your point, we're still tearing up the second access road to them in Cactus. So they're still going to be inconvenienced, even though they may not get the benefit of the project.
I guess I was picturing a lot of work having to go behind the properties, but it sounds like that would
It
be
would
actually very minimal.
It'd
So
only
that's
be on
different.
Cactus, yeah. It'd only be on Cactus.
Thank you for clarifying.
How long will you be disturbing the residents for? It's one day, right? So that was all done?
So as far as being on their property, it'd be a couple of days because they do the sewer and that's a longer trenching and they'd have smaller bobcats and stuff like that. Then they'd have to come back and do the water later. But I think the real impact is going to be when the road is torn up in front of the property. It's going, I mean, we're not going curb to curb, but we probably will be when we're resurfacing it. And that's going to be the real part of the inconvenience.
We don't want to come back a second time and tear the road up again.
Exactly. So that's why
Stay
we,
away from that, we'll be okay.
that's why we're doing the water and the sewer at the same time.
And again, I want to reiterate that we're proceeding with this because of the desire of the residents who wanted the sewer lines and access on there. There's tremendous support. And so when are you going to get the sewers in? When are you going to get, so, well, now we're getting the sewers in, so.
Well, and let's not forget, I believe if I'm correct, it's law. They just haven't done anything to enforce the removal yet, right? They haven't, the state has mandated that the sewers, the septic systems get removed, but they haven't set any dates where they're gonna start fining people yet, right?
Once we have the main sewers built.
Okay,
But right now, the main sewers are not built, so they're not mandated to.
okay,
You have to be specific proximity to a sewer system.
okay.
When will we go out to bid and have some data where we can actually choose what's?
We're out to bid right now
Okay.
and it closes
28th.
28th of this month. So I don't know that we'll be able to have all of this for you in February, but definitely by that March deadline. We're gonna try.
Sorry, 29th. 29th. Okay, yeah, we're angling to get this to the board in February.
Yeah.
Great. Great work.
Any other discussion?
One more question on my end. Can you go back to your first or second screen? It's just been one I wrote down to try and remind myself, maybe one more there. You guys referred to the M2 reapportion for D3 because M2 is fully funded by the state. But weren't we just talking about using other grant funds to help M2?
No, those are assessment district proceeds.
Okay, so two totally different monies.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, we would have liked to use this money for M2, but it's not bid yet, and this one is, so that's why it's being used as part of this one.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Moving on, item 8, general manager comments.
I have no comments today.
Item 9, director comments and requests for future agenda items. Director Martin? Director Myhoff?
Yes, I do. A little bit off, well, I was talking with AI last night, co-pilot, and I was asking him questions about Mission Springs Water District. And AI didn't have any information basically. And what they did have was, they didn't know who any of the board of directors were. So then I went down to our three other water agencies from Imperial Irrigation and the other two, and they didn't know, I didn't know who their board of directors were either. But what they had was just a mission statement. Apparently ours was updated 2014. And we went on through that. So I asked AI, how do we give it information so that when the general public asks about Mission Springs Water District, that they'll have, AI would have that correct information? I thought I was gonna have to put Assistant General Manager Champion onto him to train AI and we get everybody, but it doesn't work that way. Where they would get that information is from our database. Now, naturally, our IT guys and cybersecurity guys aren't going to give them information to the database. However, I asked AI if they could only use the information from our website and not the rest of the database. And I believe we have a firewall to keep our residents or whoever from going past our website. So AI said, yes, that could be done. So why is it so important that for me to get AI to get into our website? Is very simply, if our customers have a question, say they want to know where about Chromium 6, they could go and say, ask AI, what information do you have? What information does Mission Springs Water District have on their website about Chromium 6? Well, they'd be able to go right there. Same thing for questions from developers. They could go and ask AI what our website has to say. And apparently the other water districts haven't figured this out yet.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
What kind of questions were you asking Copilot? Because I actually about 2 months ago or maybe a month ago before my water talk had been doing some research on Copilot, playing with it myself, and called actually Assistant General Manager Champion because I was so impressed with the information Copilot had gotten. They had how many awards every year. We had a water award. They had that we had just recently received CASA awards and a SIWA award, and they had all this information about our groundbreaking coming up. Like every press release that ever hit the market was available on Copilot, and it gave very lovely paragraph statements about our district and our motives. And
it would have that information because it's been printed in the paper or out in the general public. So they were able to draw off of that information because it was out there. But they don't have information to our website because they don't have permission to get into it.
well, I don't know that I would want any AI system to breach our firewalls that protect customer data and protect our water sources and access to them. But I understand your point in wanting to make sure that there are basic information available. I think that they can search on our website, like developers can search on our website for various things and find it fairly easily.
I understand that, but that's why I have faith in our IT guys and cybersecurity guys, because they have that firewall to keep anybody from getting past that website.
I'm surprised.
If they can figure out how to keep AI from going any further than our website, then all that information will be available to AI that is on our website. So now anybody can ask almost virtually any question that would be public. So the management and the rest of you folks figure all that out.
Tag, you're it,
I don't
right?
have anything more to say about it.
Tag, you're it.
We'll look into it.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I already asked you. Do you have a comment?
No, I do. I just want to thank my fellow board members for the participation and the questions that were asked today during the presentations and everything. I learned a lot, not only from the people making the presentations, but from our fellow board members. So thank you very much.
Director Duff?
Nothing today. Thank you for your presentations, and I'll forward any questions that I have. I hope that we can put this to bed soon. Thank you.
Yes, thank you all. And with that, meeting is adjourned.